A narcissist's final move only appears when they realize they no longer own your mind. When a narcissist realizes that you are no longer easy to control, something fundamental changes deep inside them. They do not feel proud of you. They do not respect your growth. Instead, they feel deeply threatened. The very moment they see you becoming stronger, more aware, and more independent, they begin to sense that their influence is fading away forever. What many people do not understand is that this realization often triggers one final attempt to regain control. There is something deeply unsettling about narcissistic behavior that many people never recognize until it happens directly to them. When narcissists understand that their old methods no longer work, they rarely walk away quietly. Instead, they prepare one last move. It is carefully designed to shake you emotionally, confuse your thinking, and pull you back into the exact cycle they once controlled. This final move can undo months or even years of healing. If you are not prepared for it, if you do not recognize what is happening, you may step directly into their trap without even realizing it. That is why understanding this pattern is so important for your emotional survival. Before this final move appears, there is usually a period of silent psychological conflict. On the surface, everything may seem calm. The narcissist may appear distant, quiet, or even completely indifferent to your existence. But beneath that silence, something very different and dangerous is happening. The greatest fear of a narcissist is not rejection. It is not abandonment. Their deepest, most core fear is watching someone they once controlled become mentally and emotionally stronger than they are. This moment threatens the false image they have spent years building and maintaining. Narcissists depend entirely on an illusion of superiority. They need to believe they are more powerful, more important, and far more significant than the people around them. That belief becomes the very foundation of their entire identity. The problem is that this identity is incredibly fragile. Narcissists cannot easily face their own weaknesses. They avoid self-reflection at all costs because looking inward would force them to confront painful and inconvenient truths. Instead, they push those weaknesses onto other people. They criticize, they accuse, they blame, and they project. All of this allows them to avoid examining themselves honestly. When you begin healing, something very important changes. Healing does not always look dramatic or loud. It is often quiet and steady. You start trusting your own judgment again. You stop constantly seeking validation and approval for every choice. You stop explaining every single decision you make to people who do not care about your well-being. You learn how to set firm boundaries without feeling overwhelming guilt. You learn how to say no without fear of confrontation or backlash. Most importantly, you stop reacting the way you once did. To you, this feels like profound growth and peace. To the narcissist, it feels like losing complete control over your life. What you see as healthy progress, they see as a direct threat to their authority. What you experience as personal freedom, they experience as a devastating loss of power. The balance that once favored them suddenly begins to shift. They notice this shift even when they cannot fully explain it. They feel it deeply in every interaction. Narcissists are not searching for deep connection. They are not searching for mutual respect or authentic partnership. They are searching for total control. They actively look for people whose emotions they can influence, whose attention they can capture, and whose self-worth they can shape at will. Their sense of importance depends heavily on outside validation from others. They need constant reactions from other people in order to maintain their inflated self-image. Without those reactions, they begin to feel completely empty inside. When you were uncertain of yourself, they felt powerful. When you doubted your own reality, they felt important and essential. When you constantly looked to them for reassurance, they felt immensely superior. Your confusion became their greatest advantage. Your insecurity became their main source of strength. Your willingness to keep explaining yourself gave them endless opportunities to manipulate the conversation and flip the narrative. This is why many narcissistic relationships feel so utterly exhausting and draining. The connection is rarely built on genuine love or care. Instead, it is almost always built on control, validation, and emotional dependency. But everything changes when you begin standing firmly in your own truth. The moment you stop chasing their approval and start listening to your own inner voice, you no longer fit the role they assigned to you. This creates immediate panic inside them. It may not be visible on the surface at first, but internally, the narcissist begins to feel their identity cracking into pieces. You are no longer predictable. You are no longer easily influenced by their tactics. You are no longer afraid of their anger, their silent treatment, or their disapproval. And that is precisely when they reach for their most dangerous tool. Many psychologists have warned about this specific tactic because of how destructive it can be to a recovering survivor. It is psychological projection taken to an extreme level. When narcissists feel control slipping away from their hands, they often stop relying on obvious manipulations. They move beyond simple gaslighting and direct blame. Instead, they launch a much deeper, more insidious attack aimed directly at your sense of self. They begin projecting everything they cannot accept about themselves onto you. Suddenly, they accuse you of being manipulative. They call you selfish for prioritizing your health. They label you as cold, unfeeling, and distant. They describe you as cruel, unstable, difficult, arrogant, or completely unreasonable. The strange and unsettling thing is that these accusations often have very little to do with who you really are. They are simply describing their own inner world. They are taking their own flaws and placing them onto you. This stage becomes especially dangerous because it is subtle and clever. It does not always arrive through open hostility or loud arguments. Sometimes it arrives disguised as genuine concern. Sometimes it arrives disguised as deep sadness. Sometimes it arrives disguised as rare vulnerability. They may tell you they are worried about your mental state. They may say with a heavy sigh that you have changed so much. They may insist that you are no longer the loving person you used to be. They may even suggest that your healing process has somehow damaged you as a human being. They might imply that going to therapy has made your behavior worse. They might claim that setting healthy boundaries has made you selfish and heartless. They might argue that developing self-respect has made you arrogant and unapproachable. The single goal behind these strategic statements is simple. They want you to doubt your growth. They want you to second guess your progress. They want you to abandon the healthier version of yourself and return to the vulnerable version they could so easily control. This emotional attack targets something very important to your journey. It targets your path toward becoming your authentic self. As people heal, they gradually stop living according to other people's expectations and demands. They become more connected to their own personal values and truths. They stop allowing fear, guilt, and subtle manipulation to dictate their daily choices. For a narcissist, this inner transformation feels extremely threatening. Your emotional clarity exposes their deep confusion. Your calm confidence highlights their severe insecurity. Your newfound independence reminds them of the control they have permanently lost. Instead of confronting those heavy feelings honestly within themselves, they attempt to pull you back down into uncertainty. They may suddenly bring up old memories from the past. They may remind you of past mistakes you made years ago. They may focus on specific moments when you felt weak, vulnerable, or ashamed. They may rewrite history completely to suit their narrative. They may claim they were always supportive of your goals. They may insist they only ever wanted the absolute best for you. They may even offer apologies that sound surprisingly convincing at first glance. But there is a crucial difference between genuine accountability and subtle manipulation. Real accountability accepts full responsibility without making conditions or excuses. Manipulation offers just enough fake regret to reopen the door to your life. Many narcissists become surprisingly kind and gentle during this stage. They may appear reflective and thoughtful. They may seem newly self-aware and open to change. They may present themselves as a transformed person who finally understands. But often, this is not genuine growth or lasting change. It is calculated bait. They are testing whether you still doubt yourself enough to come back to them. They are testing whether your boundaries are real or easily broken. They are testing whether they can still influence your emotions and trigger a reaction. If you begin defending yourself against their false claims again, they feel encouraged. If you begin explaining yourself and justifying your actions again, they feel empowered. If you become emotionally reactive and upset again, they feel control returning to them. That is why this final trick can be so remarkably effective. It targets your deep emotions instead of your logical mind. You may start feeling unexpected guilt for standing up for yourself. You may feel wrongly responsible for their pain and unhappiness. You may wonder if you really have changed for the worse, as they claimed. You may question decisions that once felt crystal clear and necessary. You may even find yourself missing a peaceful version of the relationship that never actually existed in reality. This confusion and self-doubt is exactly what they want to create within you. Awareness is what protects you from falling into this familiar trap. Growth often appears deeply threatening to people who benefited from your self-doubt and low self-esteem. Healing does not make you heartless or cold. It makes you clear and grounded. Setting boundaries does not make you cruel or unfair. It makes you mentally healthy and safe. Self-respect does not make you selfish or arrogant. It makes you balanced and whole. The moment you recognize projection for what it truly is, it begins losing its power over your life completely. When you understand that their harsh accusations are merely reflections of their own internal struggles, you stop absorbing them as truth. When you stop accepting responsibility for emotions and actions that do not belong to you, the manipulation weakens and collapses entirely. When you stop defending yourself against false accusations, the toxic cycle begins to break forever. Narcissists depend entirely on confusion to thrive. Clarity is their absolute greatest weakness. They depend on triggering intense emotional reactions. Your calm presence immediately weakens their influence over you. They depend on endless, exhausting arguments. Refusing to engage completely removes their emotional fuel. This is precisely why the narcissist's final move often feels so intense, sudden, and dramatic. It is not a demonstration of strength. It is a sign of pure desperation. They are desperately fighting to preserve an entire false identity that was built on complete control. They are fighting with everything they have to avoid facing their own true reflection in the mirror. Your deep calmness feels incredibly threatening to them because it cannot be manipulated. Your silent strength feels threatening because it cannot be easily controlled. Your steady confidence feels threatening because it no longer depends on their approval or validation. None of your detachment is an act of cruelty.
It is clear and undeniable evidence of your personal growth.
It is proof that you have finally outgrown the restrictive role they needed you to play for so long. And once you truly understand this profound dynamic, something remarkable begins to happen inside you. You stop trying to convince them of your worth. You stop trying to prove your good intentions to someone who refuses to see them. You stop trying to gain understanding from someone who actively benefits from misunderstanding you. You stop explaining your growth and healing to someone who genuinely fears your progress. You stop sacrificing your internal peace just to maintain a connection that was always built on power and control. Instead, you consciously choose a completely different path. You choose emotional clarity. You choose unwavering self-respect. You choose lasting peace. And making that single choice changes absolutely everything about your life. The deeper truth is that real strength does not come from trying to control or change other people. Real strength comes from deeply understanding yourself. It comes from integrating every single part of who you are into a cohesive whole. It comes from standing firmly in your truth, even when others try desperately to distort it. When you continue moving forward without engaging in the narcissist's final attempt at manipulation, you complete a cycle that they simply cannot follow. They may leave for a while. They may try to return later on down the road. They may try completely different tactics to get to you. They may constantly look for brand new ways to trigger your old emotional wounds. But once you can clearly see the underlying pattern for what it truly is, it never holds the same power over you again. You stop reacting out of sudden fear. You stop reacting out of misplaced guilt. You stop reacting out of mental confusion. You begin responding strictly from a place of deep awareness. And awareness changes everything about your reality, because awareness allows you to recognize manipulation long before it ever reaches your heart. Awareness allows you to see projection clearly before you mistakenly accept it as your truth. Awareness allows you to stay firmly connected to reality, even when someone else is trying their best to distort it. That precise moment is when their control over you truly ends. It does not end when they finally walk away for good. It does not end when they offer a fake apology. It does not end when they finally seem to understand your point of view. Their control ends the exact second you stop needing them to define who you are as a person. And once that shift happens, their final move loses its power completely. You become vastly stronger than the fear they once used against you. You become stronger than the heavy guilt they once placed upon your shoulders. You become stronger than the chaotic confusion they once created in your mind. Most importantly of all, you finally become free. And that personal freedom is the one thing a narcissist can never control or take away from you. Boundaries are not an act of rejection against others. Confidence is not an act of arrogance. When this kind of emotional pressure no longer works on you, they quickly move to their next strategy. They begin talking about the shared past in a way that sounds incredibly emotional, sincere, and deeply personal. They bring up fond old memories. They remind you of special shared experiences from back then. They talk at length about specific moments that once felt profoundly meaningful to both of you. They tell you with a soft voice that they miss the way things used to be between you. They say you used to smile much more back in those early days. They claim that life felt so much easier and simpler back then. They heavily suggest that everything was better before you started focusing so much on yourself and your own needs. At first, this calculated approach can sound deeply touching. It can sound like genuine, heartfelt reflection. It can even sound like real, enduring love. But right beneath the surface, something very different and deceptive is often happening. They are not actually longing for the real, authentic you. They are longing for the specific version of you that was vastly easier to influence and manipulate. They deeply miss the version of you that rarely questioned their behavior or decisions. They miss the version of you that constantly gave everything without ever asking for anything in return. They miss the version of you that explained yourself endlessly, while they offered very little empathy or understanding back to you. They miss the version of you that completely ignored your own valid needs just to keep the peace in the relationship.